All right. I know this might be dating myself as a younger person, I guess, probably. But who remembers this show? Who's watched all of it in its entirety multiple times? Yes. Whose favorite scene is the pivot scene? Anyone? Favorite scene, the pivot scene? We'll be talking about moving today, or the paste pants. I love the paste pants. Anyone? I should have put those clips in there because they're just hilarious. I remember, this show is on for 10 seasons, and there's a picture out now that's what Rachel's baby would be like 21 or something now, which is crazy to me. But, I remember watching back before, we had streaming. I think it was Thursday night, it was Friends night, and I would stay home to watch Friends, right? And I remember thinking as I'm watching the show, man, I want that. Here's this group of friends who are so close that they're together every day. They're constantly together. Not only do they live together, most of them lived, 4 of the 6 lived across the hall from each other. And they just come and go from each other's apartments, and they were always together. They did everything together, and they were this close-knit group of ride or die friends. And I remember thinking, man, I want that. I want that type of community, that closeness that comes from that kind of community, because in college I had friends, but when I got out into the real world, for the first couple of years there were about 4 of us who hung out a lot, but then after I changed schools, I didn't have that anymore. And I remember it was 2008, and I got to the point in my life where I felt like I had very few friends. I feel like I had a couple friends who I would do stuff with, but I didn't have that. And I wanted that. And I felt so alone. So like on Fridays and Saturday nights, I had a bar friend who I would go out to the bars with. And she and I were bar friends, but we weren't like, I didn't call her up on a Wednesday and say like, what's up? We chit-chatted, but we were just people who both wanted to go out and didn't want to do it together alone. And so we would go out, and then on Sunday mornings, I would go to church to be a good little Catholic girl, check the box, went to church. And I would come home by myself, and I would get groceries by myself, and I would have this day all by myself. And unless I called my parents, I literally wouldn't speak to a single soul all day. Because it was a church where I would just show up, tuck myself into a pew, and head out at the end. And there are a lot of nights when I would lay in bed at night, and I would think to myself, if someone broke into my house, saw this single girl living by herself, and broke into my house and killed me, how long would it take anybody to figure out that I was gone? Would anyone even really miss me? Would anyone even notice? Besides my parents, and the fact that the principal would have to find a substitute teacher for the rest of the year, would anyone even care if I was gone? I felt so incredibly lonely and worthless, and I thought that the answer was a husband. I was like, if I could just get married, then I will have purpose. Then I can have kids, and then I'll be a mom, and I can leave a legacy, and then I will have meant something on this earth. Because right now, if I die, it doesn't even matter if I lived. And that's where I was at. There was a lot of crying as I went to sleep, because I felt so worthless and alone and useless. And I liked to play volleyball. I was terrible at it at the time. And because I didn't have any friends to go play with, the only way I could play was to go sign up for a tournament. And so I showed up for this tournament one day, and this tournament had been canceled, but this was before text messaging. And so I didn't know. I showed up, and there was basically nobody there. There were a handful of other people in the same boat as me who showed up for the tournament, and were like, well, now what do we do? So we just played pickup. We had this great day. And I played with this guy named Carter. And over the course of the day, we're hanging out. He had a boat. We went out on his boat and hung out, a group of us. And I was saying, like, this is so fun. I wish I could do this on the regular basis. Just show up and play and hang out with people. And he said, well, actually, I'm part of a group of people who do this. Every Sunday we play, and then we hang out. He's like, you should come. All right. So a week or two later, I show up on a Sunday. Carter's not there. So I'm like, sitting there awkwardly, because like, what do I do? Because I don't know any of these people. But fortunately, they invited me out to play. And then they invited me to go hang out after they played. And I show up to this guy's house. And there's probably 25 people there on a Sunday night. And this is regular. This is the way they do every Sunday. And they're like the friends group. They're these people who all know each other. They're joking, they're laughing. Someone's playing the guitar. Everyone's just chill, just hanging out. And I was like, what is this? I want this. This is what I want to be a part of, Lord. And I'm sitting on the couch next to this guy named Moose, because he's a big guy. And he says, Stephanie, do you love Jesus? Now, as a Catholic, we don't talk like that. And I was like, oh, yeah, sure, I like Jesus. Like, we just don't say those. As a Catholic, you don't say that. Like, I was like, yeah, sure. He's like, well, you should come to church with us. Well, turns out that's how all these people knew each other, was through their church. They all went to Crossroads. And so he's like, you should come to Crossroads with us. And I'm thinking, no, it's one of those big, weird churches. So I hung out with these people for a couple more weeks. And I was like, this group of people. I remember calling my friend, my bar friend, on my way home from that first night, calling her saying, oh my gosh, Andrea, I found this really amazing group of people. We should start hanging out with them because they're awesome. And so after hanging out with them a few more times, I started going to church. And I loved the church experience. But what I really loved about all of it was I was now a part of this group of friends. It kept getting bigger, and it was just fun. I mean, we were hanging out at least 3 nights a week. I'm busy. I was coaching still at the time, so like I could only go about 3 nights a week, but I bet 5 nights a week there was something going on. People were getting together for dinner, people were in small groups, people were in Bible studies, people were just going to karaoke on a Thursday, whatever. And so I started going when I could and hanging out with them, and I was there all the time. I was with these people all the time. And we got these really strong friendships. And my faith exploded. Because not only were we getting together, we were getting together to talk about God. We would get together and we would pray together. We would get together and we would sing worship songs together. We would get together and we would have a small group or a Bible study. And so my faith was like... And we became such amazing friends that they helped me do terrible things. You know you're a good friend when you help someone lay flooring. The picture on the left is my friend Jill. Jill is a hire it done kind of person. Like, she grew up as a hire it done kind of person. You know, and she has this funny thing, she does not like to bend over. She, I don't know why. She's like, I just hate bending over. So when I was going to sell my old house, I needed to redo the kitchen because it was old. And I was like, she's like, you want to hang out? I said, I can hang out, but I have to grout these floors. She's like, I'll come help you grout. So for her to say she'll come help me grout, that's like a huge indicator of our friendship right there. And then when I moved into my Ludlow house, I needed to refloor my back room. So my friend Bob came and helped me refloor my back room. And my friends I did hire a moving truck for the big stuff, but like a moving day, I bet I had 6 or 7 people with trucks show up, and they're just throwing all my stuff in their trucks and helping me move. Like, when you've got friends who will help you move and lay flooring, you know that's a good friend. And that's the kind of close relationships that we had, and it was all because of a church. We found what Ross and Rachel and Joey and Phoebe and Monica found through church, which I just think is amazing, because how else are you going to find it? In this world, it's hard. If you don't my parents moved recently. They're 70. It's hard for them to make friends because those of you who are parents, you make friends with your kids' parents, like your kids' friends' parents, in sports, or maybe the people you work with. But it's hard to make friends as an adult if you're not involved in something. And church used to be the epicenter of that, but churches aren't that anymore, because churches in America, a lot of churches in America have been show up for your weekly TED Talk and go home. And while that's great, it doesn't form those strong bonds. So what we started to do is, not only we hang out and do fun things, we go bowling or go karaoke or have a cookout, but we also met very intentionally and started doing Bible studies and small groups. And when I remember the first time someone says you should get in a Bible study, I was like, that's what weird people do. Or when my friends were like, yeah, we're in a small group, and I was like, that's kind of weird. And then I got in one, and I was like, this is not weird, it's amazing. And I formed some of the strongest friendships. Here's my small group. All but one of those girls was in my small group. We met every Sunday night. We would meet, we would eat together a lot of times, we would eat together, and we would talk about Jesus. We would pray for each other. We could be real with each other. We could say, this is what's going on in my life. We could cry, we could rage, we could laugh. And not only did we meet Sunday nights, but then we'd hang out Friday nights, or this was New Year's Eve. We'd do a New Year's Eve, or whatever. We celebrated things together. We lived life together. And those are the girls that, there's Jill, the one who helped me floor. She's in the blue dress in the front. Like, these are people, the one on the far right in the black sweater. This is funny. This is a funny story. I did not have this in the sermon, but I'm going to tell you. Her cat died, and she had to move, and someone had buried her cat for her where she lived in her apartment, and she's like, I have to move and I don't want my cat left behind, so she called and asked me to move her dead cat. That's how close of friends we were. I moved her dead cat for her. That's how tight we were. That's the sign of true friendship, but that true friendship did not come from just showing up on Sundays together. That close-knit friendship came from getting together weekly. And we get this idea. We didn't come up with this ourselves. Crossroads is a giant church. Crossroads, the main campus, which was their first one, seats 3,500 people at a time. And they were at the time having 5 services on a Sunday. And so there's no way in a situation that big that you can make friends. Just showing up to a dark auditorium where everyone's singing, it's like a concert. You're not going to make friends that way. The Crossroads, and I know, I follow Elevation Church, which is the same kind of thing, but down in Georgia, I think. They say the same things Crossroads did. You've got to get into smaller groups. You've got to find some godly community and start meeting with them and doing life with them regularly. You need to create the friends version of friendships and meet and talk about Jesus and challenge each other and come close to each other and have each other's backs. That's where you get your quality friendships. And Crossroads and Elevation, they didn't make up the idea. Jesus did. Well, probably it was before Jesus, but we definitely see Jesus do it in the Bible. Jesus started with his 12 guys. He had his 12 dudes. They hung out, they ate, they went to weddings together. They worked together. They were together all the time. They formed these strong relationships where they talked about God, they worshiped God, they took communion together, they ate together, they did life together. There's a story where Jesus shows up to have dinner at Peter's house, and Peter's mother-in-law is really sick in the other room. So what's Jesus do? He's not like, oh man, sorry she's sick, let's have dinner. He's like, I'm going to go in there and heal her, and he goes in and heals her. That's what a small group does. That's what these tight-knit groups do, is they create these strong friendships, these strong relationships. You guys, there's 3 billion Christians in the world today, and that started with 13 guys. 13 friends split up. Once Jesus was gone, they split up, and each of them went 2 by 2, and they found some more friends. And then eventually, those groups would split up, or they would get so big that they'd have to burst apart, and they'd make more friends. And now there are 3 billion Christians in the world because 12 guys were doing life together. Because 12 guys took the message of who Jesus was out to the world. That's what we're supposed to do. The book of Acts was written by a guy named Luke. He was not one of the disciples. He came along the scene afterwards, and he's like, I'm going to write this stuff down for posterity's sake. And so he went and he interviewed all these people and he wrote it down. And there's the book of Luke, which is Jesus' life. And then there's the book of Acts, which is what happened after Jesus died and rose again. What happened with the disciples, the apostles? What did the apostles do immediately after Jesus' ascension into heaven? So that's what the whole book of Acts is about. So here, this is early in the book. They're at Pentecost. And they're hanging out because Jesus said hang out and then wait for the Holy Spirit. So the Holy Spirit comes on them and they're living life together. And this is what it says. They devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching and to the fellowship, to breaking bread and prayer. Everyone was filled with awe at the wonders and signs performed by the apostles. All the believers were together, and they had everything in common. They sold property and possessions to give to anyone who had need, and every day they continued to meet together in the temple courts. They broke bread in their homes. They ate together with glad and sincere hearts. In praising God, they enjoyed the favor of the people, and the Lord added to their number daily those who were being saved. It doesn't say that Peter did go to the synagogue and preach, and people were saved. And that's great. But after someone is saved, they still need a group of people. Or they'll fade away. They won't know what to do. They'll fall away. Our job as a church is not to just show up on Sundays and check the good girl box like I used to do. Our job as a church is to take what we know about Jesus, to make some friends, to create a friends-like group, and to meet and to talk about the Lord together, to live life together, to eat regularly together. That's who we're called to be as a church. You know, loneliness is hard. There's some of us in this room who are single and lonely. There's some of us in this room who are married and they're lonely. Loneliness is hard. It is hard to feel like you're all alone. 60% of Americans say they regularly feel lonely. And they even say that loneliness is as bad for you physically as 15 cigarettes a day. Now, we all know that 15 cigarettes a day is super bad for you. But they say when it comes to living a long, healthy life, loneliness is as dangerous as almost a pack of cigarettes a day for heart disease and all that kind of stuff. Having friends, having relationships, having a unit of people who are your people is so incredibly important, and that's who God made us to be. God was already existing in a group, and he wanted to expand his group, so he made us. And he didn't say, it was nice, I made you, now go out there by yourself, I'll see you at the end times. He made them, and then he walked in the garden with them. He wants to be in relationship with us. We are called to be in relationship with each other and God, all together. And so if you want, like I did, and I still do, it's funny because I look back as I tell this story, I'm like, oh, I'm kind of right back where I started. I'm kind of right back to feeling lonely and feeling like I've got friends, but not like ride or die friends, other than Jill. Jill would still come help me lay flooring. But like, if you want that, if you're feeling lonely, if you're feeling like your faith is like stalled out, the way that we energize our faith, the way that we energize our lives is through these groups, these small groups. And some of you are thinking, that's great, Stephanie. If I could have a group of friends, I would. I would already have it. Don't you? Jill and I talk about this. We're like, how do we even find friends? We don't even know because we're adults and we don't have kids in sports to like go hang out with our kids in sports friends. But it starts with just finding one person. Find one person. Be like, hey, let's start hanging out. Do you want to go for a walk? We can walk and talk about Jesus. Hey, do you want to get dinner? We'll have communion. We'll pray, and we'll talk about the real stuff in our life. If you'll just invite one person and ask the Lord to help you find those people. Say, God, I'm lonely. I need people. Would you help me find some people? I want my Monica, Joey, Chandler, Ross group. Would you help me find that? Would you put people in my path who I can be friends with? And the Lord will be faithful to answer that prayer. So your challenge this week is one, especially if you're feeling lonely and if you don't have your group of friends, start praying for it. Ask the Lord to show you at least one person that you can start hanging out with on the regular. And when you hang out, you notice what they did. They broke bread, so they had communion. They invited God in. They talked about God. Like, you can talk about sports and stuff, but you got to invite God into that. They met in the temple. They met and talked about God. They met and invited God into that. So as you find your new friends, Invite God into that. Be bold and brave enough to have communion together. Be bold and brave enough to pray together, to worship together, to talk about the real stuff, and pray for each other together. That takes a bold step, but I tell you, it will be worth it in the end. So that's your challenge this week, is pray for it and ask God to help you find your people. And all God's children said,